Hello, I'm Michael, and this is Tarot by the Tree. We're nearing the end of a set of discussions now studying the 22 cards of the Major Arcana. The 22 cards fit over top of two trees, the Tree of Life and the Tree of Knowledge. Both trees are Kabbalistic representations of 10 spheres, each in a certain location. We are now in the seventh sephira of one of these trees. It's the sephira called Netzach. On the first tree, when we hit this sephira, we were introduced to the chariot. The chariot has just come from his sister's realm. That's the realm of strength. That's where, as he moved from Malkuth up through Yesod, into Hod, where he learned strength, he's moved over to Netzach. And here we saw him as the chariot. He's resplendent. He's got a sun sign on his head. He's specialized armor. He rides a canopied chariot pulled by two mythological beasts called Sphinx, known for their wisdom. He's got everything together here. He looks fancy, but he's not. He's prepared because he has moved out of the realm of Hod. We will see many people in life who look resplendent. They drive a fancy car, they wear nice clothes, they've got all the little touches, the wristwatch and everything. Not all these people are like the chariot. The chariot doesn't dress to impress. He dresses to do his job. These are things he has won over his journeys. The chariot is the charioteer because he has control over his intellect and his emotions. And that's really what we're going to be looking at today in the card of the moon. Remembering that, like water, the moon is a sign of your subconscious, of the energies of imagination. In the first trip through the Tree of Life, we were introduced to this, the seventh sephira, and it was the chariot. Today we have moved into the second tree, the Tree of Knowledge. We've moved down to the same sephira. It was the chariot, and that's what we would teach to younger people. The second tree, the one we're on now, the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil, is something that is often too complex, or it might make youth jaded. So some of the teachings are withheld until they've managed to integrate the first set of 10 lessons. We're now on to the second tree, 17th card. It's in the 7th place, and this is what we're looking at today, the moon. I'll describe the card. In the moon card, we've got two critters, two beasts, two canine-looking things. Maybe they're foxy. They stand either side of a worn and winding path that disappears into the distance, seemingly going on forever into the mountains. On either side of this card are the two pillars. They resemble tall keeps at the moment, almost fortresses, but those represent the two towers, one of severity and one of mercy. The other way of looking at it, one of clean and one of growth. In the foreground of this card is just water. And coming out of the water, there appears to be a lobster or some kind of crustacean. This is not a creature of dire warning or great distress. It's a symbol of something scary. Let's look at the card meaning. Above all is the moon. And the moon is bright. Some of its brightness fall is descending yods. There's a face on the moon. The face looks down, and there's not a lot of expression on the face. I imagine it's one of displeasure, but that's subjective. The moon is a sign of your imagination, of your instinct. And that's what's taken over in this card. Everything is in the light of emotion and instinct and feeling. The two towers are there, but they're not represented the way they usually are. They've become something different in the imagination of the person who is represented by the moon. The two animals have gone wild. They represent the lower orders, perhaps the wolf and the first dog, where even the higher order of dog is still in the bestial zone. They imagine that they are between mercy and severity, but really their logic and their common sense has left them. And so there's not a lot of reality in the mind of this card. The imagination informs the intellect of possibilities. The intellect is made aware of something, a theory or an experiment, and that's the imagination serving the intellect. The charioteer had a high degree of both of those. He had a high degree of intellect and knowledge, and he has a high degree of control over his imagination. Intellect brings imaginary ideas into corporeal reality. The intellect will bring something not here and make it here. The imagination is unlikely to do that. The imagination needs the support of the intellect, and the intellect benefits from the support of the imagination. There's a synergy when the two work together, and that's what we saw in the Chariot card. He was resplendent. He had control over his imagination and his intellect, and he was in a chariot pulled by these two same animals, but they're now evolved. They no longer represent canines. They are the highest possibility of animal evolution as the Sphinx. Together, the intellect and the imagination can be more than the sum of their parts. They work on each other to create something better than either could on their own. Let's look at the moon card in a reading. You're reading for somebody and the moon card comes down. These are some of the things that I might say. There has been a separation in your mind. And I don't think I'd go much further than that. I would follow that by saying something like, you have ideas. These ideas seem amazing to you, but you find they are sometimes doubted by other people. I would ask if the aspirant sometimes felt overwhelmed by their emotion at times. These are all the things that are going to be part and parcel of the moon card. You'll approach it gently. You're not just going to say, are you crazy? You're going to say, is there some discrepancy now between your feeling and your logic? And finally, I would say, you suspect that there are enemies lurking. You suspect that there are people who mean you harm. The advice in a reading that I would give after asking those gentle questions about how they're feeling and how their intellect and emotions are cooperating, I would give them a few suggestions. I would say, consider realizing that for the moment you're out of balance. And I think that's something everybody can relate to, and it's a good starting point of agreement. The second bit of advice would be, in a moon card, you're looking at people whose basic abilities have become taken apart and divergent, running wild. So part of the advice to someone with a moon card would be tend to your physical, intellectual, creative, and social parts. Tend to all of the parts of your body. It seems that because of this or that, the emotional part of your mind has, it feels like logic to you, just like it in the card. It feels like the animals are between the two paths, on the path of mildness, in between severity and mercy. But again, as you see by the moon, everything is in the imagination of these animals, and it's not an accurate description of what reality is. I would finish the advice with two more things. One, concentrate on one thing at a time, and that may settle them down. A person whose imagination is running away with them is often dealing with sort of an implosion of ideas. And finally, do less, but see what you do through to completion. And that will perhaps stop some of the scattering attitude of running with emotion devoid of intellect. We've been talking a little bit about mental health, and it's not just about being crazy or sick. It's about all of us going through times in our life when our emotions seem to be guiding us. And we'll notice that if we're getting angry a lot, or crying a lot, or being obsessed with ideas of getting back at somebody. These are all ideas that there may be some imbalance. We may find ourselves following our feelings more than following our intellect. And that's another sign that there's something overwhelming going on in us. And the final thing, the great introspection of so many people where they think they are the universe, and anything dealing with a person whose aspect is the moon card would be to bring them out of themselves, to try to occupy them with something in reality that would unite their mind and their emotions. Okay, why don't we turn to some of the questions now?
How does the moon card help explain each of the suits in general?
Well, the moon card is a symbol of mental health. In swords, anytime you use a sword, it's double-edged, you're going to hurt yourself as well as somebody else. When your emotions run wild, any power you have is going to be very likely inflicted on somebody. It's another one of these hold up the lens of compassion before you take any movement involving your power.
How about in general for the staffs?
In general, for the staffs, we look at your plans, aspirations, your enterprise. If your plans, and we just touched on that a little bit at the end, if you tend to be doing a lot of things at one time and not seeing them through to completion, if you feel overwhelmed by the number of ideas coming your way, these are aspects that your plans are not being directed fully by your intellect, but are more likely being inflamed by your emotions.
How does the moon affect the cups in general?
In general, the cups, of course, are happiness. And it gets very, very funny when we get into terms of mental imbalance. As we see that the two animals are between the two pillars, they think they are on the path of mildness. Joy can come out of any form of imbalance or even madness. The idea of joy isn't really a good measure for how well things are going. So when we're talking about the mental health, I think we're probably best to look at an abundance of joy as maybe a warning sign.
How does the moon affect the wands in general?
We did the staffs.
Oh, okay. Which one didn't we do? The coins?
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, the coins.
Okay, in the coins, this person has worked very hard and is disappointed in it.
The general first, and then
Okay,
we'll go with the
in
particular.
terms of coins is your wealth, and it can be an indication of the balance of your mind and emotions. But then again, it might not be. The idea that you are having some monetary success may mean this and it may mean that. We can see all kinds of YouTube stars that do something maybe a little bit silly, but they get sudden and instant fame and the money rolls in. At that point, they may think that their plans are going very well, but it's not. They're, instead of a staff of enterprise, they're a twig on the ocean being thrown around by the waves.
Okay, let's go into the particular. So the coin, since you just finished doing the general, let's look at the 7 of coins.
Okay, now remembering that the moon card is in the 7th place of the 2nd Sephira, the tree of knowledge, we have this person who has worked hard and is disappointed by the outcome. And this is something that intellect has to look at. If you're working hard, not receiving the rewards that you expect, could there be something in your work ethic or your work practice that is not intellectually sound, logical, or rational? This person has worked hard, but things have not measured up. And the idea is that he didn't have things in place to get what he wanted. He used hope and imagination rather than logic and established practice. And the reality is, just ideas alone seldom produce for you.
How does the moon card help explain the 7 of staffs?
The moon card is a person with plans, enterprise, messages, and he feels that a lot of people are trying to reach him right now, and it's bothering him. These are competing plans. He feels no danger. He's got the high ground. He's got no injury. But he feels that there are these competing ideas at his door all the time. We mentioned in the card the idea of the suspicion of hidden enemies, not really dangerous, but fearsome. This may be an aspect of that card where, as your imagination leaves the confines of your intellect, you start to perceive any kind of criticism or advice as an encounter with an adversary.
How does the moon card help explain the 7 of swords?
The moon card. In this card, the 7 of swords, you've got away with something. But something that gives you some power. But somewhere you know you didn't absolutely deserve this. It's been an aspect of chance, or maybe even an aspect of a dishonorable act on your part. In the card of the moon, there aren't always the rational cues to behavior. Desperation can set in, like the farmer that didn't see the rewards coming in from his effort because they weren't really based on sound practices. Similarly, in desperation, in the midst of mental and emotional confusion, this person has reached out and scooped something that's going to work for him, but perhaps he didn't have full rights to that. But in his desperation and mental and emotional confusion, this person has done something that in his completely integrated state, he would not have felt was honorable.
How does the Moon card explain the Seven of Cups?
Seven of Cups is a great card for the Moon. There's another card we see, I've called it the genie card, where there are all these cups and a guy is inviting you to make a wish and it'll be granted. This is a similar card, except the person, the genie, is not there, and that's you. You've discovered it. They all look like treasures. You can see beautiful women, you can see jewels, castles in the sky, mysterious things. It looks like this is an opportunity, and you can make a wish and you can take something. But in this card, everything you choose will have a monkey's paw, that short story, where everything you wish comes to pass in a way that's not what you wanted and can be actually terrifying. This is a card of what happens when you make choices, when you don't have your intellect and imagination locked. The imagination is very quick to assume possession of your mind, and all the choices that seem so good to you are just imaginary.
Is the monkey's paw who is the author? Edgar Allan Poe?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Let's get back to the card itself, the Moon card. What exactly are the two mammals in the Moon card?
These are two canines, a dog and a wolf. The Sphinx is an animal so highly evolved that it rivals humans and even exceeds humans. These are canines. One's a wolf and one's a highly evolved wolf, a dog. They're both critters running wild. The difference between a wolf and dog has no benefit in this card.
Why is a lobster on the shore?
The lobster is a crustacean. It represents something scary, and that's all, nothing dangerous. This is an imaginary enemy, and with the imbalance of mental and emotional parts of your brain, you sometimes see enemies where they aren't, and part of the concentration on yourself that accompanies this disjointed state can make you feel paranoid sometimes and imagine dangers where there aren't dangers. Part of it comes with the that introspection that comes along when the mental and emotional states are disjoined.
What does the moon in the sky mean? It's got a face.
Yeah, and that sets the stage for the whole card. Everything under it is in the light of imagination and instinct, and that's an animal thing. There's a lot of feeling in this card. There's not a lot of thought. In fact, feeling has taken over the mind. So the landscape of the mind now is based on emotion, and intellect is only fitted in as the imagination allows. This is not a mentally or emotionally healthy state to be in.
What is the significance of the watery foreground?
Again, mirroring the moon above and below, we are dealing with imagination. And that's what the water is. We can see it flowing right from the top of the tree with the Empress. And these are the thoughts that haven't occurred yet. These are the ideas in your mind that you haven't experienced. The water is the source of imagination from below, and above, the moon is a source of instinct from above. These people are not operating logically. They're operating from misconceptions in their mind because the imagination has run loose from the intellect.
What are yods and why are they falling?
Yods are holy grace descending from above, and they're falling from the moon. And this is reminding us these are not evil creatures, the dog and the wolf, the descent of the Sphinx into beasts. This has happened because of an imbalance, not because of anything bad or evil or intentionally harmful. There is an illness here, and it can be temporary. And these falling yods suggest that there is no room for blame or accusation here. This is a time for healing.
Why are the beasts between the two towers?
In their mind, they are doing everything right. And if you talk to somebody who is disjointed, whose imagination and intellect have divided, they will tell you that they are between the paths of severity and mercy. They believe they are. If they do act to you too severe, they will say they're just responding to something. The two towers that the animals seem are simplistic. As I mentioned, they're more like keeps or fortresses. They suggest the pillars of severity and mercy, but these are just figments of the imagination of the animals.
Why are they howling at the moon?
They're communicating with their imagination and instincts, which is overwhelming to them. There's something more powerful to imagination in the brain than intellect in the brain, which is unfortunate. You can have intellectually verifiable ideas, and it's pleasant and it can be stimulating, but it doesn't very often drive you to a kind of mania that imaginative ideas will do. And the intellect is so necessary. It is the connection on the chariot between the two beasts. And there is no longer any connection. They howl at the moon. They just try to comprehend with their imagination.
What is the pathway disappearing in the distance?
This is the overwhelming sadness, I think, sometimes with this kind of thing, is that there is no end naturally to their howling at the moon, to their imaginary boundaries of severity and mercy. This is emotion is taken over, logic is suspended, and I think we have to have compassion. In their mind, they often don't see an end to this road. They have lots of hope fors, lots of Hail Mary passes that could result in something great. But I think in the back of their minds, they feel lost and they feel that the end is not in sight anymore.
Can the moon card become the chariot again?
Absolutely. It's just a form of harnessing the two beasts, and they will again merge. There'll be the Sphinx. You'll have that Vav, the link between the two, and you will be resplendent in a canopied chariot. It is the linking of the two things, and that's another reason for the yods and the compassion, is that this is an injury and it can be healed.
Any final thoughts?
Just that the separation of mind and emotion doesn't have to be a cataclysmic thing where families gather and there's intervention and talk of doctors. It can be very temporary and very short-lived. It happens all the time in different conditions. It can happen when you're overwhelmed with emotion or even just exhausted. I think that all these things exist on a continuum, and there are times in all of our lives when intellect can prevent the stimulation of imagination, and imagination can prevent the stabilization of intellect. There are times when we all get out of balance, and that's what this card is about. Thank you. And thanks for listening, and we'll go on tomorrow, and we'll be looking at strength in the sun. Bye for now.